Bonjour et bienvenue. So in this video, in honor of Bastille Day 2023, we're going to be talking about the Song of Roland. This is the earliest surviving major French language work of literature, and it is very patriotically French. Probably composed around 1098 or 1100, somewhere in there. This tells the story of one of Charlemagne's campaigns in Moorish France, in Moorish Spain. That is the Spain controlled by North African Muslims from around, I think, the 740s. The conquest of Spain is completed. And the Moors remained in charge of Spain until 1492. But Charlemagne, the emperor of the Franks, did make attempts to reconquer portions of Spain. Now, at one point, he was withdrawing from a campaign in Spain in order to go basically and deal with an issue elsewhere, when his rear guard, and I want to say this was this was in, I can't remember, 778. So August of 778, Charlemagne is withdrawing. He's left a rear guard behind to guard the baggage trains as they are going through the Pyrenees. That rear guard and baggage train is attacked by the Basques, who are a group who live primarily in the mountains in northern Spain and southern France. Charlemagne's rear guard is attacked by the Basques. They are wiped out, just completely destroyed. The baggage train is plundered, and the Basques they just peace out. Like they're just gone. They disappear back to their homes, basically. Charlemagne can't avenge this defeat because the Basques have, just gone. They did what they intended to do. They destroyed this rear guard and captured all the stuff, and then they disappeared. They go back to their normal lives. So Charlemagne never gets to fight anybody to avenge this loss. And so when we get to the Song of Roland, several centuries later, there is a kernel of historical truth to what occurs, but it's very, very different. The way that the Roland poet portrays these events. We're going to go through it. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that occurs because it's a medieval epic poem, and that means it is just wild. Some crazy stuff happens. So we start with this opening setup. Charles the King, our great emperor, has been in Spain for 7 long years and conquered that proud land as far as the sea. There is no castle which can resist him, no wall or city left to be destroyed, except for Saragossa, which stands upon a mountain. It is held by King Marci, who does not love God. He serves Muhammad and calls upon Apollo, who cannot prevent disaster from overtaking him. So we have this setup, this very direct but efficient setup of what's going on. Charlemagne, has basically overrun most of Moorish Spain. He's reconquered it for the Christians, for the Franks, the French Empire. There's only one city left that opposes him, under King Marci. And we get this weird bit where, clearly Christians in medieval Europe didn't really understand Islam because they conflate Islam with sort of paganism more generally. We have this line here, line 8, He serves Muhammad and calls upon Apollo. Apollo being a Greek god, not worshipped by Muslims. Yeah, I mean, Muslims would be followers of Muhammad, but they're not pagans per se. In the medieval worldview, in the medieval Christian worldview, the medieval European worldview, they were pagans because everybody who's not Christian is a pagan. Possibly Jews are the exception to that. It's what we do. But this idea that, like, these are pagans, therefore they are polytheists, or they have a number of gods, it does reflect a profound misunderstanding of Islamic beliefs. So, Marseille and Saragossa are the last things that Charles hasn't conquered yet. Marseille is concerned that things are not going to go well if he has to face Charles in battle, because Charles has thus far been super successful. So he sends some dudes to Charles's camp to basically be like, hey, how about you leave Spain, and then King Marseille will follow you to your capital at Ai. He will become a Christian. He'll give you a ton of money and camels and goats and carts and stuff, and, we'll not have a war anymore. So Marseille makes this offer with no actual plan to follow up, no plan to go and become a Christian, etc., etc., and he just sort of is banking on Charlemagne being like, meh, it's too much work to go back into Spain to get this guy, even though he betrayed me. So that's the plan. This offer is presented to Charles, who prays to God and then summons his council of nobles. And basically, Charles is like, what you think? The first one who steps up is Roland. And basically, Roland says, believe Marseille and you will regret it. We came to Spain 7 long years ago. I've conquered for you nobles and commibles, and taken Valterne and the land of Pine, and Balaguer and Tudela and Sicile. I probably pronounced these wrong. I apologize if you're Spanish or French or whatever language these town names are being presented in. And King Marseille committed a most treacherous act. He sent 15 of his pagans, each bearing an olive branch. They addressed you with these very same words. You sought advice from your Franks, and they counseled you in somewhat reckless fashion. You sent 2 of your counts to the pagans. One was Bassan and the other Bastille. You took their heads on the hills beneath Haltia. Wage war as you set out to do. Take your assembled troops to Saragossa, lay siege to the city as long as you live, and avenge those whom the traitor put to death. So Roland says, you cannot trust Marseille. He has lied and betrayed his word in the past. Let's just go conquer the city. Let's fucking be done with it and just take the city. We can do it. It's not going to be that difficult. However, a dude named Ganelon speaks up, and then Lord Names ends up agreeing with Ganelon. So Ganelon is Roland's uncle. It's not real clear why he hates Roland as much as he does, but Ganelon seems to have a deep hatred of Roland. And basically, Ganelon says, let's not keep having a war. Let's have peace rather than war. We can trust Marseille. He will do what he says. Anybody who suggests we continue the war is an enemy of the Franks. Names backs this up. Charles is like, okay, that makes sense. We'll go with that. Several people then volunteer to take this message to Marseille. And Charles is basically like, nope, can't spare you. Can't spare you, can't spare you. Finally, Roland is like, hey, Uncle Ganelon, he should go. He'd be fucking fantastic at delivering this message. Ganelon is like, I hate you right now so much. You are being a dick to me. And so Ganelon, in front of the king and everybody else, is basically like, when I come back, I will fucking destroy you. We will feud until you are dead, Roland. And everybody's just like, yeah, that seems like a totally normal thing to say. I'm not at all concerned about that. So, Ganelon goes to Marseille. They come up with a plan where Ganelon will go back to the Franks. The goal at this point basically is, hey, if we can kill off Roland, then Charles will lose the will to fight because Roland is his right-hand guy. Plus, Ganelon hates Roland for reasons that are really not clear. And so Ganelon and Marseille come up with this plan where Ganelon will go and basically get Roland put in charge of the rear guard, and the Spanish, they're sometimes called the Spanish, they're sometimes called the Muslims, or sometimes called the pagans. I'm mostly going to call them either the Spanish or the Muslims. Basically, the Muslims will descend on the rear guard it'll be about 20,000 men, is what Ganelon predicts. The Muslims are going to take about 100,000 men and just destroy them, just wipe them out. Kill Roland, kill Oliver, Roland's BFF, kill everybody who's there. Good stuff, good plan, can't go wrong. So, that's what they decide to do. Everything is going swimmingly. The Spanish army, so that all happens. Roland is in charge. Oliver's there. The 12 peers are there, who are just sort of like dudes, a bunch of dudes, like top knights and whatnot. And my boy, Archbishop Turpin, I love Archbishop Turpin. I don't know what it is about him. He's my favorite. He's super cool. He's an archbishop, obs, but he's also like an incredible warrior who, like, these Muslims will come out of the Spanish army and just be like, your God is dumb. And Archbishop Turpin will just be like, now I've cut you in half. He's fucking badass. So, he's there too. Basically, they're all there. They're just chilling. They're like doing rearguard stuff. And then all of a sudden, 100,000 Spanish troops are around us, ready to destroy us. And Roland is like, good, we will fight and we will be awesome because otherwise we would shame our families. And Oliver, Roland's BFF, is like, hey man, maybe you should blow your horn to get Charles's attention and have him bring back the rest of the army so that we can actually win this fight. And Roland is basically like, no, I'm not going to shame my family and destroy my reputation by calling for assistance. And Oliver's like, I think you're making a mistake. But Roland's like, too bad, I'm in charge. So Oliver's like, great, all right, let's do this thing. So Marseille and his army show up. Roland and his troops are prepared. And then basically you get this section kind of in the middle of the poem. The middle portion of the poem is this huge battle scene. It's super gory, actually, so I'm not going to read much of it, but basically you get a ton of narration about individual combat. So, like the first one here, Aelroth, Marseille's nephew. Aelroth does not sound to me like a Muslim name. It sounds more like an Anglo-Saxon name, but you know what? That is what it is. So Aelroth comes out from the Spanish army, and he's hurling. It says here he hurls insulting words at our Franks. Treacherous Franks, you will join battle with us today. He who should have protected you has betrayed you. That's Charles. The king is a fool to have left you in the pass. Today the fair land of France will lose its fame, and Charlemagne the right hand from his body. Then it says, when Roland hears these words, O God, what anger! He spurs on his horse, lets it race ahead. The Count rides on to strike him with all his might. He breaks his shield and tears his hauberk open. He splits his breast and shatters all his bones, severing from his back his entire spine. With his spear he casts forth his soul, and giving him a firm push, makes his body topple. With a free blow of his lance he flings him dead from his horse. He has broken his neck in two. He will not forego, he says, the chance to rail at him. You utter wretch, Charles is no fool, and never a man to care for treachery. He acted properly in leaving us in the pass. Today the fair land of France will not lose its fame. Strike Franks, the first blow is ours. We are right, but these wretches are wrong. So we get, just stanza after stanza after stanza, just page after page after page of these single duels, basically, where a Spanish knight or lord or whoever it is will come out of the ranks, say something insulting, and then Roland or Oliver or Archbishop Turpin or one of the 12 peers or whoever it is will go and just kill the dude. Just long time we get this. Then we get these collective battle scenes where all kinds of stuff is happening, but even then, we're still focusing on individual combats. Finally, by this point, the Franks have killed thousands and thousands and thousands of Muslim soldiers. They're just massive losses for Marseille's army, but the Franks are losing men as well. Just the sheer weight of numbers is wearing them down, even though they're each killing hundreds of enemy soldiers per person. Yeah, this is one of the places where things get a little bit insane. Just the sheer body count that each of these individual French knights is racking up kind of doesn't make any sense. But finally, things are in a dire situation. There's only a few of the Franks left, and so Roland says, all right, now I'm going to blow this horn and get Charles to come back. Oliver's like, no, man, you fucking coward. Now you do this? When we're going to die anyway? You should have done it at the beginning when I told you to. Now you're just going to shame everybody. And Roland's like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And Oliver's like, no, don't do it. And then finally Archbishop Turpin comes over and he's like, listen, man, here's what you're going to do. You're going to blow that horn, and here's the reason. It's not going to shame us. We're all going to die. Totally cool. I'm on board with this. That's what God wants from us. But Charles is going to show up. He's going to, A, bury our bodies. B, kill everybody that we haven't already killed. So this is all good. Totally cool. And so that's what happens. Roland blows the horn. We get these really long death sequences. Oliver is fatally wounded, and he takes several pages to die. Roland several times faints on his horse because of how sad he is that his friend is going to die. There's a lot of fainting in this epic poem. Finally, Oliver dies. The only two sort of left standing are Archbishop Turpin and Roland. Archbishop Turpin goes out and fights and kills a bunch of Spanish soldiers. Then he is severely wounded with he's got 4 spears through him, and he just goes on fighting, but he knows he's mortally wounded. Finally, he eventually dies, and the Spanish soldiers are driven off when they hear Charlemagne's bugles resounding, so they know that the main French army is coming. Roland, so there's a weird bit where Roland has blown his horn so much that his temples have burst and are bleeding, and his brains are leaking out his ears, all of which seems like a bad sign. And indeed, he does then be all right, Archbishop, I'm going to get all our dudes who've died. I'm going to gather them up right here so you can bless them before you die. Then I'm going to go die on a hill with my face toward the enemy so that everybody will know that I was not a coward, which he does. And it's a long death scene for Roland as well. Then Charlemagne shows up. They find everybody. Charlemagne goes off to find Roland's body. He faints a couple of times. You get these bits where like 10,000 French knights are fainting at the same time because they're so sad that Roland has died, which I find stretches credulity. Like, sure, they killed hundreds of guys in one go. Fine, I'm on board with that. It's clearly French propaganda. Fine, whatever. But the idea that just 10,000 knights were just like, no, I'm not buying it. Not important, though. The Roland poet obviously doesn't give a shit whether I agree with this or not. But this is kind of where things... This is one of the places where things diverge from history in an interesting way. So first off, there was the fact that in history, in 778, when these events actually occurred, the rearguard was destroyed by Basques, who were not Spanish Muslims. They weren't Moors from North Africa. They are an indigenous people of Europe. So that's one difference. The other big difference becomes in this version, in the Song of Roland, rather than the enemy sort of dissipating and Charles not getting to take revenge, here he pursues them to a river. Can't remember what the name of the river is off the top of my head, and I don't know if I marked a passage with it. But he pursues them to a river, and then the river Ebro. So he pursues them to a river and basically destroys all of them. So everybody either is killed by the French or they drown in the river. Whole army. Marcy survives because he is already gone because Roland cut his hand off. So he was like, all right, I've done my bit. I'm going to go back to my castle now. So that occurs. Now, there's an interesting bit here. I really like this. So the Franks are pursuing the Spanish army. And it says here, when the king sees the onset of evening, he dismounts in a meadow on the green grass, lies down on the ground and prays to God that for him he should stop the sun in its tracks, postpone nightfall and maintain daylight. See, an angel now comes again and speaks to him. Immediately he commanded the king, Charles, ride on, daylight will not fade you. You have, as God knows, lost the flower of France. You can avenge yourself on this criminal race. With these words the emperor mounted his horse. God performed a great miracle for Charlemagne, for the sun remained where it was. Now, those of you who know your Bible may recognize this as a sort of echo of Joshua 10, verses 12 through 13, in which God stops the sun in the sky to give Joshua more time to defeat the Ammonites. This, in the Bible, is the symbol of God's great favor on Joshua and the Israelites. They are, again, the chosen people. And so the fact that this miracle is repeated for Charles in the context of a medieval poem in which everyone would have been very familiar with Bible stories. I mean, this is, again, I'd used the term French propaganda before, but the idea that Charles is literally the divine chosen one in the vein of the prophet, or in the vein of the biblical hero Joshua. Yeah. So, after that, Balagant brings a massive Muslim army. Balagant, who is the emir of Babylon, and apparently in charge of the entire Islamic world, just brings a huge army of Muslims from all different parts of the Near East, Eastern Mediterranean, the Balkans, brings a massive army, because apparently Marcy had earlier sent him a letter saying, hey, Charles is getting close, I need some dudes. Balagant apparently took his time, but now he's here, and he plans to ride out and basically destroy Charles and his army. There's a big battle. Eventually, Charles and Balagant engage in single combat, which, with angelic help, Charles is able to win. And so he defeats this massive Muslim army. They conquer Saragossa. They destroy mosques and synagogues. I'm not really sure why you had to come after the Jews. Haven't we suffered enough? But they destroy mosques and synagogues, and they convert or kill the entire population of the city to Christianity, with one exception, which is Bramimonde, who was the now widow of King Marseille, who was brought back by Charles to his capital, in order to convert her to Christianity there. Also, when they go back to Count Ganelon goes on trial for having arranged with Marseille to have the rear guard of the French army wiped out. Basically, Ganelon makes the defense that this was not treason because everybody knew he had a beef with Roland, and therefore he was allowed to arrange for Roland's death. Initially, the group of barons who are charged with determining whether or not Ganelon is guilty are inclined to just be like, listen, man, let's just give it a rest. Like, no harm, no foul. Roland's dead, can't do anything about it. Let's let Ganelon go on this one. But Thierry, who is, I guess, Roland's buddy, is basically like, no, that's dumb as hell. He killed Roland and wiped out a bunch of French nobles and knights and whatnot. Like, clearly this dude has done a bad thing and should be held accountable. I will fight anybody on Ganelon's side. This is what's called a trial by combat. Basically, Thierry, who's not a particularly big dude, challenges a champion from Ganelon's party on the basis that whoever wins the fight will represent God's judgment. Either Ganelon is guilty if Thierry wins, or he is not guilty if Pinabel, who's the guy who steps up to fight for Ganelon, if Pinabel wins, then Ganelon is innocent. Pinabel's a big dude, Ganelon's a small dude, or Thierry's a small dude. Thierry still wins. He wrecks Pinabel. And so, Charles is like, all right, well, that settles it. God has said Ganelon is guilty. So, these 30 of Ganelon's kinsmen, who had basically been like, we think he's a good guy and shouldn't be killed, they are all sentenced to be hanged because they sided with him. Ganelon himself is quartered, which means his 4 limbs, arms and legs, are attached to horses. Those horses are sent off in different directions, and he's brutally ripped apart. Then, Bramimonde is converted to Christianity. Basically, she's just been like inundated with Christian propaganda, and considering that her husband and her former army had been let down by their gods, only one of whom would actually have been their god, but they were let down, so she was already kind of getting into the agnostic thing anyway. She's now been converted to Christianity. She's renamed Juliana, apparently what you do. And then we end with this really weird thing where it's like, the king lay in his vaulted chamber. St. Gabriel came to him in God's name. Charles, summon your imperial armies. You will invade the land of beer and help King Vivian in Imphe, the city which the pagans have besieged. The Christians call upon you and cry out for you. The emperor had no wish to go. God, said the king, how wearisome my life is. He weeps and tugs at his white beard. So, that's where it ends. It's literally just, Charles has done everything he set out to do. Roland has had a heroic death. They've conquered Moorish Spain, and he just wants to rest and be an old man. And God's like, nope, got to keep going, keep fighting.